Nostradamus and the Third Antichrist. This will only be the prophecy that's given at the end of the book, and it's published by Watkins Publishing, London. Mario Redding is the author. Part 3: The Third Antichrist, the one still to come. Nostradamus, Third Antichrist, quatrains concatenated. Now, having got the 19th and 20th centuries and all their associated disasters out of the way, and to further reinforce the very real threat of what Nostradamus tells us is likely to occur during the course of the 21st century, I am going to do something which has never been done before. I am going to concatenate my English translation of all of Nostradamus' third Antichrist quatrains into one continuous narrative. I would refer you to my chapter entitled The Third Antichrist, the One Still to Come, for my line-by-line commentary on the poem. I think my readers will agree when they read the following that it makes for a truly stunning dramatic narrative. Stained with mass murder and adultery, the great enemy of humanity will be worse than any man before him, in steel, fire, water, bloody, and monstrous. Though born in poverty, he will take supreme power. He will tyrannize and bankrupt his people. Raising a 1,000-year army, he will seem lucky, though he cost both lives and money. Milk and the blood of frogs flows in Dalmatia. Battle is joined. There is plague near Belings, wailing with echo throughout enslaved Slovenia. When the monster is born in and near Ravenna, at the total eclipse of the sun, the monster will be seen in broad daylight. He will be misinterpreted. None will have foreseen the great cost. From deep in the western part of Europe, a child will be born to poor parents. He will seduce the multitude with his tongue. The noise of his reputation will grow in the eastern kingdom. A great king falls into the hands of a youngster. There is confusion around Easter time and a knife blow. Long-term captives in St. Elmo's fire at a time when three brothers wounded and kill each other. The young Nero, using 3 chimneys, will burn the living world in his ardor. Happy, the person far from such practices, 3 of his own blood will watch him die. Mobbus, though dead, returns. Both man and beast suffer terribly. Then all of a sudden, vengeance arrives, much blood, thirst, hunger, when the comet passes. With the plague over, the earth shrinks. Peace will reign for a good while. People will travel through the sky like birds and by sea and wave, before war once again is called for. London's Prime Minister, ruled by America, will freeze out the Scottish enclave. The Rob Roys will pick themselves, so false an antichrist, that they will be thrown into the mix. The shining deed of the newly elected elder will be blown south by the great northern wind. Great halls are raised by his own sweat. Fleeing, he is killed at the bushes of Ambalon. The great mountain, 7 stays around after peace, war, hunger, flood, will row far, destroying great swaths of country, even antiquities and mighty foundations. From the regions governed by Libra, a great war will come, enough to disturb the mountains. Both sexes will be captured, and all Byzantium, so that cries will be heard at dawn from country to country. Slicing armor is hidden in the torches inside Lyon on the day of the sacred mountain. Those of Vienna will be put in the mincer by the Latin cantons. Macon does not lie. The spear from the skies will complete its extinguishing. It will speak of death, a terrible execution. The proud nation will be returned to the stone and the tree. Rumors of a human, brutish monster bring first catharsis, then sacrifice. He will enter, ugly, bad, and infamous. He will tyrannize Mesopotamia. Friends will pretend that the adulterous one has a soul. The land is horrible, and the black of aspect. The islanders will face a long siege. They will defend themselves vigorously. Those outside will be assailed by hunger. It will be a far worse famine than those who preceded it. The cry of an extraordinary bird will be heard, cannoning through the air shafts. The cost of a bushel of wheat corn will soar so high that man will make of man a cannibal. The eagerly awaited one will never return to Europe, but will reappear in Asia, one of the Confederacy descended from the great Hermes. He will grow above all other kings of the Orient. The third Antichrist will soon be annihilated. His war will have lasted for 27 years. The heretics are either dead, captive, or exiled. Human blood reddens the water that covers the earth in hail. By arcs of fire, pitch, and flame are they repulsed. Screams, cries, and shouts at midnight, they are launched from inside the smashed defenses. The traitors escape through their secret passages. Sudden joy inside sudden sadness will occur at Rome of the jealousy guarded favors. Mourning cries, tears, weeping, blood, excellent joy. Opposing groups, surprised and locked up. The locked and fated eternal order of things will switch direction thanks to a new order. The old Greek order will be broken, its citadel taken. The enemy will not be accepted. The blood of innocents, of widows and virgins, the great wet red one commits many evils. Holy images are infused with the light of votive candles. Terrified and fearful, people will no longer dare to move. Near the great river, a ditch will form. The land will be eaten. The water will split into 15 channels. The city falls. Fire, blood, and cries conflict. Much of it caused by the collision. The royal bird will fly over the city of the sun. 7 months earlier, there will be a nocturnal augury. The eastern wall will fall amidst thunder and lightning. For 7 unremitting days, the enemy will be at the gates. The great scolder, bold and shameless, will be elected head of the army. The boldness of his contentions will cause the bridge to break and the city to faint with fear. When even the trees shake mightily and the south wind seems covered in blood, so many will try to escape that Vienna and Austria will shake with their passing. Phrygia, Antibes, and the towns around Nice will be devastated both by land and by sea. Locusts will come on propitious winds, kidnap, death, rape, pillage, no martial law. When the sun is at 20 degrees in Taurus, a great earthquake will totally destroy the packed great theater. Air, sky, and earth will be murky and unsettled, so that even infidels will call on God and the saints to steer them. He will be born of the pit and of the immeasurable city, product of dark and infernal parents who wished the power of the great and revered king to be destroyed by Rowan and Evero. The old demagogue, with the salt measures teetering, will be urged never to release the captive. The old man, though not weak, does not wish to be maligned. By legitimate means he delivers him to his friends. It will seem to human beings that the gods must have been the authors of the great war. Once, long ago, the sky was clear of weapons, whereas now on the left hand there is damage still to come. Formerly inhabited lands will become unfit for human life. Cultivatable fields will be divided up. Power will be given to overcautious fools. From that moment on, death and discord for the great brothers. New laws will rule new lands. Towards Syria, Judea, and Palestine, the great barbarian empire will decay before Phobos concludes his dominance of the century. Time present and time past will be judged by the great comedian. The world will tire of him when it is too late, having forsaken its conventional clergy. When the great number 7 completes itself, games will begin at the tombside, not far from the turn of the millennium. The dead will rise out of their graves. After Nostradamus' extraordinarily accurate depictions of the first 2 Antichrists, Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler, in 47 and 30 quatrains, respectively, his rendition of the third Antichrist in a further 36 quatrains becomes even more sinister. This is a man, we are told, who will, like both of his predecessors, start a global rather than simply a pan-European war, on a scale, however, unsurpassed by even the First or Second World Wars. In addition, there will be both a run-up and an aftermath to this catastrophic conflict, which will quite literally change the face of the earth. If you look carefully at the chapter I have entitled Nostradamus' Third Antichrist, Quatrains Concatenated, in which I have run together all of Nostradamus' original verses, dealing with the Antichrist into one continuous narrative poem, a number of potential secrets are revealed. For a start, the true nature of the beast is clearly delineated. I will now go through the poem line by line for you, picking out particular elements and key lines that I think might throw light on the character and significance to humanity of the one still to come. The first line of Nostradamus's, I shall call it the concatenation from here on in, for ease of reference, introduces him clearly. He will be both a mass murderer and an adulterer. It is important to remember here that adulteration, does not simply imply uxorial betrayal. It is also an alchemical term, and Nostradamus is almost certainly using it in that sense, implying someone who adulterates or dilutes, i.e., a man who weakens, changes, and transforms things. The person concerned is also the great enemy of humanity. In other words, he is everyone's enemy and will eventually bring down even those who blindly follow him, just as Hitler and Napoleon did with their followers. As with Jesus, whose evil mirror image he is, the third Antichrist will be born in poverty. This conceivably affords him kudos and allows him to gather to himself the poor and dispossessed of the world who wrongly believe that he is one of them, just as they felt that Hitler was one of them. He ended the Great War, a lance corporal, or, in U.S. terms, private first class. Even his name means one who lives in a hut. And that Napoleon was one of them, because he too began his career at the bottom, even though he was born into the minor gentry and benefited accordingly, with both financially and in terms of status. He will seem lucky, thinking of both Hitler and Napoleon earlier campaigns. Both of them appeared to have the luck of the damned, with Hitler in a particularly benefiting from his arrogation of the originally Russian concept of the Blitzkrieg. This seemed luck tempted people into the anti-Christian camp who would not otherwise have considered coming over. The world has always valued a lucky man, believing perhaps that the condition is catching. He will be misinterpreted, meaning that, again, as with Adolf Hitler, otherwise well-meaning people will falsely judge the third Antichrist to be a good man. Many thousands of otherwise sane German women believed that Hitler would have made the ideal husband and wrote to him accordingly, often enclosing their house keys. He will burn the living word in his ardor. All tyrants from Julius Caesar, who inadvertently burned the great Brachium Library when he set fire to the fleet in Alexandria Harbor, through Bishop de Landa in the Yucatan, who burned the Mayan codexes, and Adolf Hitler via Joseph Goebbels and via some particularly gullible students who burned 25,000 allegedly un-German books in Berlin on 10 May 1933 as part of a nationwide move to reaffirm traditional values, have seen fit at some point or another either to burn the books of those who disagreed with them or otherwise censor free speech. Heinrich Heine, the great German poet and humanist, wrote in his Almanzor in 1821, Dort wo man Bücher verbrannt man in Ach Maschinen. Wherever people burn books, there finally they will also burn people. Mobbus, though dead, returns. This is another dark echo of the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, of whom the third Antichrist is the evil mirror image. Abus in French means abuse or misuse, and j'aime abuse means I abuse myself, while Mabul, which has euphonic connections to Mabus, means a lunatic or a crackpot. There will even be a period of false peace. Peace will reign for a good while, just as there was in Adolf Hitler's time, following British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's now infamous peace in our time speech after the trumped up and misconceived Munich Agreement of 30th September 1938, and just as there was in Napoleonic Europe after the 27th of March 1802 Treaty of Amiens, which ushered in a curious one-year period in which tourism restarted and genteel English ladies and their husbands were able once again to visit their Paris courtiers. Hostilities, somewhat inevitably given the benefit of hindsight, restarted on 16th of May, 1803. The coming Great War, enough to disturb mountains and triggered by the Third Antichrist, will be prefaced by a series of events, including the striking of the Earth by a comet. The great mountain, 7 stades around, will roll far, destroying great swaths of country, and the death of a newly elected leader at the bushes of Ambilon. Ambilon, in this case, is most probably an anagram of Bellana, the ancient Roman goddess of war. Bellum in Latin means war, whose priests used to split open their thighs and use the blood in their predictive rites. Rumors of a human, brutish monster bring first catharsis, then sacrifice. This is a fascinating conceit, as traditionally catharsis, aka purging or purification, follows sacrifice, aka evacuation, according to Aristotle. Surely, or as Walter Burkett puts it in his The Orientalizing Revolution in Greek cathartic practice, blood is purified through blood. A piglet must be slaughtered in such a way that its blood pours over the polluted man. The blood is then washed off, just as was done by Apollo at Troezene in the case of Orestes, who had, with some justification, murdered his mother, Clytemnestra, leading to renewal and the washing away of guilt. Orestes died happily of old age in his 90th year. But what if the system is reversed? Surely then the guilt is not washed away, but simply reinforced. Friends will pretend that the adulterous one has a soul. This is a clear harking back to the first line of the concatenation and echoes the wish-fulfillment fantasies present in so many erstwhile allies of both Hitler and Napoleon, who managed to convince themselves, despite all appearances to the contrary, that the men to whose wall they had nailed their colors might not be the murderous rogues they belatedly suspected them to be. A famine follows, and the cry of an extraordinary bird is heard, cannoning through the air shafts. Could this be the Roc, a fabulous white bird of an unbelievable size, which was allegedly able to truss elephants in its talons and carry them back to its nest according to the Arabian Nights? Or might it be the phoenix, another fabulous bird, which, upon living a certain number of years, makes itself a pyre of spices, sings a final dirge, the cry of an extraordinary bird, and immolates itself only to reappear again in order to repeat its life, exactly as before. Remember, 5 paragraphs back, Mobus, though dead, returns. Nostradamus' image in line 73 of the concatenation, that man will make of man a cannibal, seems clear enough. Cormac McCarthy, for instance, uses it brilliantly in his end-of-the-world Armageddon novel, The Road, but I believe also that Nostradamus meant it to be taken metaphorically, in the sense, let's say, of the suicide bomber destroying both himself and his victims, in what he believes erroneously to be justifiable murder. Then we are back to Nostradamus' beloved number 7 again. See, the beginning of my chapter, entitled Nostradamus' Antichrist, for my riff on the significance the number 7 might have had for the seer. 7 months earlier, there will be a nocturnal augury. For 7 unremitting days, the enemy will be at the gates. When the great number 7 completes itself, games will begin at the tombside. 7 in this context clearly represents a summing up, an end, if you like, of holiness or the holy time. For in the final analysis, Nostradamus clearly believed that his powers of prediction only encompassed in detail a period of roughly 700 years, from the 15th to the 21st century. It is also clear, however, that he does not feel that the antics of the man he calls the Third Antichrist will result in what eschatologists call the end of the world, or Armageddon. This will occur, according to Nostradamus, roughly 7,000 years after the birth of Jesus Christ, and will involve a final judgment by one he calls the Great Comedian. So what Nostradamus appears to be describing in his 36 third Antichrist quatrains is less a holocaust than a virtual repositioning of the world before Armageddon occurs, a final twisting on its axis of a world which will have a further 5,000 years to go after the appearance of the third Antichrist, and in which digests the lessons it has learned from his effect. Does this mean that there are further Antichrists to come? Who can say? Nostradamus certainly does not choose to delineate them. Nostradamus' great closing image in the final line of the concatenation that the dead will rise out of their graves, however, is a clear reference to the Eastern Orthodox tradition of the doom painting, the Last Judgment, of which perhaps the greatest of all examples is still visible on the westernmost outside wall of the sacred monastery of Voronet at Sekiva, Romania. It was actually painted during Nostradamus' lifetime, circa 1547. Nostradamus lived from 1503 to 66, under the aegis of Archbishop Gregor Laska. The mural, which I visited and photographed in 2009, is designed in 5 horizontal registers, with the whole scene crossed like a diagonal line of a trapezium by the river of the fire of hell in the lower right-hand corner, in a scene entitled The Resurrection of the Dead at the Last Judgment. We clearly see the dead in twos, men and women, rising out of their communal graves, just as Nostradamus describes in his final quatrain. They are dressed in white grave garments, possibly suggesting a return to the innocence of birth, rebirth, and they are clearly responding to the call of an angel's trumpet. But here is the ultimate curiosity. The dead are accompanied on their journey by certain symbolical animals: a dog, a fox, a bear, a lion, a dragon, a snake, and a wolf, and a wild boar, each carrying a human heart in their mouth, intent on giving back to God the souls they have devoured during their lifetimes. Only a deer has nothing in her mouth, as she, being non-carnivorous, is deemed entirely innocent, having nothing whatsoever to release.